You not only have to be able to have the ability to throw, but you have to have that hole in your personality that requires constant adulation and reassurance and love. That just kind of has to be part of the equation at this point. What is that doing to people?
Steve Young, Warren Moon, Peyton Manning, John Elway, Tom Brady. Quarterback is the most powerful position in American sports, the one that has in its way kind of echoes of what it must have been like to be a Marcus Aurelius or a king, prince in any field, literal or otherwise. What does that do to a person? How does it change a person? Seth Wickersham is one of the greats at what he does. He's a senior writer at ESPN, the New York Times bestselling author of It's Better to Be Feared. The conversation is obviously about sports a little bit, but I think ultimately a conversation about greatness. Is it possible to be a quarterback and a reasonable, regular person?
We're so obsessed with spotting genius early without really understanding what makes the genius in the first place.
They're basically American gods. It's like the penultimate of American sports. You make ungodly amounts of money, famous, everyone wants you, it's all this stuff. And here you have a guy who walks away from it.
They have nowhere to put all of this anxiety and insecurity and doubt and whatever it might be. And so where do they put it?
For people who've gone through some form of adversity or harrowing experience or struggle with something, you'd think it would turn on empathy, but it turns off empathy.
That has to do with our American obsession and American ambition. You know, the first question I asked Andrew Luck when we started talking was I asked, I remember I saw, your books in Sean Payton's office.
I know. Yeah, that's been cool. I met him once. So I spoke at the NFL owners meeting 7 years ago.
Okay.
That was the weirdest room that I've ever talked to.
The weirdest collection of all these different types of assholes.
Well, it was it's 32 billionaires.
Yeah.
Plus their families, plus every GM, plus every coach.
Yeah.
And it still worked it's still a work conference it was a strange room.
I mean, that's my beat, you know?
Yeah. It was interesting.
The boardroom.
Yeah. And I guess they do it twice a year or something like that.
They do them more, but they only do the big one once a year.
Yeah. Yeah, and then it was on the other hand, like every other conference, it was the same. It is. There's something equalizing about it. It's they're there. They had badges.
Yep.
They're sitting there. They're they like some of the speakers, not some of the other speakers. And then there was a get together after, and then I remember I went up to Belichick after, and he was
because you probably knew him from.
Well, he knew my work. We never met, but it was clear that his then girlfriend, not the infamous
Linda.
one, but was no, you have to go for a little bit. I want to talk to people, he probably wanted to be in his room, watching a film. And she was can we do something? It was so it's just very weird to see the kind of human element. And it's
totally.
Some of them are friends. Some of them hate each other.
They're all they're all in an arranged marriage that none of them want to get divorced from.
Yes.
But they all kind of secretly hate each other.
Yeah. And even the inequality amongst them, it's you have Stan Kroenke, who I've gotten to know a little bit, and it's he owns 5 sports teams.
Yeah.
And then you have someone who their great grandparents bought the team for $100.
Totally.
And that's the entirety of the family wealth. And so that just that there's social dynamics, even to the outside, they're all the same. They're all the 1%. They all, and you're actually no, there's cliques and groups and totally different approaches, and it was insane.
Well, and the ones who bought their team remind the ones subtly all the time that they inherited theirs.
Oh, right.
Which is a really interesting class dynamic.
Yeah.
And you have situations where the Bears, they have 40 some McCaskies who own the team.
Yeah.
They limited how many of them can be on the field before a game because there's so many
of them. There's not enough tickets.
Yeah. It's it became a problem. There's too many people. So when do you write?
In the mornings.
What time? What's your schedule?
I dropped my kids off. I dropped my kids off at camp this morning. Came here. I wrote for an hour. Then we had a staff meeting. Then I have this. I might do a little bit of writing in the afternoon, and then we have a book club for the bookstore this afternoon. That's my day.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't have to do any reporting though, so I don't have to spend a lot of time on the phone. Do you know my writing is if I'm sitting there, I'm writing.
But that's a whole different mental exercise and mental gymnastics, because it may not require the travel, but like one thing I've realized about books, and Wright, Thompson, and I kind of realized it at the same time, is that they're all essays. All the good ones are essays, whether they're reported essays or not.
Sure.
They have to be, you know? And so you have to be constantly on that thinking level. And that's a hard place to get to.
Yeah, I've likened it. It's like, you know, sometimes like you close your laptop and then you come back to it a couple hours later and it's like burning hot because it like somehow didn't shut down. That's what your brain is like when you're like when you're in the middle of it. There's a part on a book where you like, you've gotten it.
Yeah.
Like you're like, oh, I'm actually going to finish this. Like it's going to come together. That part's fun. Yeah. But it's the whole, like the first maybe like 2/3, maybe a little bit more than the first 2/3, where you're just like, it could fall apart at any moment and you could come up short at any moment. You know, maybe it's like in sports where it's like, oh shit, I think we're at basically an insurmountable lead. If we just don't fuck this up, we're going to walk away with this. And that kind of pre-celebration energy.
Could be the Falcons, could not, you know.
Not that. I'm talking like in the fourth, or like in an NBA game, it's the fourth quarter, it's like 2 minutes left and you're up by like 15. You're like, oh, okay. As long as we'd have to do a lot wrong in a row. So as long as we just don't fuck it up, we got this. That's a good feeling. But most of it, it's nail biter the whole way.
I grew up in Alaska and I do a lot of extreme skiing with some of my buddies, and it reminds me a little bit what you're saying of that, where it's like the first 20%, you're like, yes, this is hit or miss. Yes. Like we might be, you know, sledding down, you know, who knows? And then once you get to a point, you're like, okay. You
can look up, you're like, I've made it a good chunk of the hard part of it's behind me. Again, it's not that it's easy from here, but like, I'm pretty sure I have this. That's a good feeling.
Yeah.
There's a thing that entrepreneurs talk about. So you get like the first bump of your media attention. That's really exciting. And then it's like you immediately go into what's called the trough of despair. Yeah. And that like you spend most of a book in the trough of despair. Just like, what did I sign up for? Am I literally capable of doing this? Is this the worst idea ever? You know, all that. That's the shitty part.
Yeah.
There's another shitty part after you finish, but before it's out, where you're like, there is a conceivable chance that this could sell 0 copies. Like, you know, they're like, we're talking to these media outlets and like none of them have committed yet. Where you're just like, and then did you do the audiobook?
I did.
Yeah, then you have to go read it. Like, I'm about to do my next book in here. I do them in here. And, like, I just want to kill myself after it. I'm like, this is the worst fucking
thank God
book.
It's not just me.
No, because
there's certain points you're like, 100 more pages? Seriously? What more do you have to say?
You hate the book just because it's taking a lot out of you. And then you're only spending more time with it and getting no external validation whatsoever, right? So it's just it's you and your inner monologue, and it's you. Unless you're a delusional narcissist, that monologue is mostly about all the things that are wrong with it.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And then there's the other part. Did you ever see Swingers?
No.
Oh, okay, so it's a funny movie.
Yeah,
you have to be careful Googling it because like some other shit comes up, but you know, it's about young actors in Hollywood in the 1990s. It was like Jon Favreau's and Vince Vaughn's.
I know the movie.
So there's this part in it, you know, Jon Favreau is heartbroken the entire time, and he's like having like this heart-to-heart with Ron Livingston, and Ron Livingston is talking about heartbreak, and he's like, you know, it hurts all the time, and then it hurts a little less, and then you kind of miss the pain, you know. And Favreau's like, you miss the pain? What? And he goes, yeah, because you lived with it for so long. And then I feel like that's a part too.
Totally. No, I mean, I'm just finishing a 4-book series. So I've been with this series for 6 years. And so, and I've had these different periods. What the weird part about it is it's like, each book is a microcosm of the whole series, but it's been this weird thing where it's like, you work on one, is it good? And then it comes out, it does well. So then you have the elation, but then you go right into the shit of starting the next one. So this is the last part of it. And then I'm done. And there's a quote I have it. It's from Gibbon, where he's talking about finishing the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. And he says, it's like taking leave of an old friend or something like that. And there's something to that where you're like, you miss it because you spent so much time with these people and these ideas and this thing, and then you're going to go off and do what next? It's a weird feeling.
Thank you, by the way, for having me.
Of course.
This is super cool. And if you didn't finish it, it's totally okay. Let me know if I can fill in any blanks. It's, you know, I don't take offense.
I wanted to start with Andrew Luck.
Sounds good.
Because, as you say, it's like they're basically American gods. It's like the penultimate of American sports. You make ungodly amounts of money, you're famous, everyone wants you. It's all this stuff. And here you have a guy who walks away from it. Is he the sane one or is he the insane one?
Andrew Luck is fascinating because he doesn't know.
You're not supposed to do that.
Yeah, well, he doesn't know the answer to that question.
Right.
Is he the one who got out at the right time, or is he the one who turned away something that he'll never have again, and he knows that?
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time with him in 2022 for an ESPN story, and it was the first time he'd spent anyone with a writer since he retired. And we first started meeting, I want to say February. Story came out that December. So we met a lot.
Yeah.
And part of hanging out with him was watching him replay this decision in his head.
Yeah.
Knowing that in his heart he made the right decision, but he was still uneasy with it.
Yeah.
Because, and this is kind of, I think what led me to writing the book is like being a high school quarterback in Anchorage, Alaska, you know, in the 90s and losing out on the starting job on varsity. You know, my entire identity was geared towards this thing. And you don't play quarterback, you are one.
Yeah.
And he was one. And his entire identity was wrapped up in this thing, but he knew he had to get away from it.
Why?
And I think that he didn't like who he was as a quarterback.
Huh. On the field or off the field?
Oh, 100% off. On the field, I think he was very happy with who he was, but there's no roadmap. And that's one of the most interesting things I found about this, like, you know, spending time with current high school guys, you know, from Arch Manning to others, but like, there is no way to do this.
Yeah.
Even though they've kind of tried to make there be a way to do this. And so there's no way to tell if what you're doing is the path to greatness. And he came to the Colts. Peyton Manning had been there. Peyton Manning ran the entire building.
Yeah.
Andrew Luck was 22 years old. And he thought, well, that's how you do this. And, you know, he basically tried to do his version of that with very little guidance. And he realized that to get to game time, you cannot have any doubt.
Yeah.
It's almost like you have to create like a fragile ecosystem around you where, you know, you're at the center of it. It's Andrew's world, and everything kind of revolves around you. And that's the way he did it for a long time. And when he got hurt, he started to realize the fatal flaws in that mindset, in having like almost kind of like reverse engineered his entire life to win football games. Once he was away from the game, he started to realize that there was limits to it, and he didn't know elements of himself at all.
Do you think that's a failure of like the system or culture, or is it just inherently any elite performance is going to be inherently isolating because by definition of being the greatest or in this small minority, no one knows what it's like and you're distant from everyone else?
I don't have a great answer for that. You know, for ESPN, I spent a ton of time with Alex Honnold, you know, who obviously did Free Solo. Yeah. And he reminded me a lot of a quarterback in the sense that like people thought that he was this daredevil who was indifferent to death and didn't mind if he died, when really it was the opposite. What was interesting about him was that he was so scared of dying that he memorized every single dimple and pebble and shift on El Capitan. And so that when he finally climbed it without any support system, he knew every single move that he was going to do. It took him years to do that.
Yeah.
And that reminds me a lot of quarterbacking, where you have to be obsessive on that level to be successful. And you have to tap into a part of your personality that either you need to get up to speed or pre-existed.
Well, I just mean there's probably 10 named sports writers. You know what I mean? Like there, in any given field, there's only so many people doing it. So you must have some sense of what it's like. Like you have to turn yourself kind of, there's something fundamentally unbalanced about being one of the top people at the thing that you do. Probably you have to become unbalanced to get there. And then there's something unbalancing once you're there because you're like, there's no one who's like, let me show you how it goes, because they want your spot, or they know you want their spot, or they're dead. You know, like being like number one on the call sheet, as they say in Hollywood, like the conductor stands alone. That's just how it goes.
It is. And you have to be broken in the right places and healed in the right places, you know, otherwise you end up like kind of flaming out. And I think that like when it comes to Andrew, especially, you know, he not only began when he was hurt and his shoulder was bothering him, and you know, he didn't know if he was going to return to be able to play. His wife, you know, was on the verge of leaving him. She was his girlfriend, you know, but like she was on the verge of leaving him because they had dated since Stanford, and he simply wasn't communicating anything with her. And here he was facing all this fear, identity crisis, pain, and he had to learn how to tap into that part of his personality.
To be a person.
To be a person, to be a husband. And I think that like once he did, he made it a point to see if he could make it. You know, he played that final season, the 2018 season, and he won comeback player of the year. And he had proved to himself that he could be someone that he liked being around.
And be good.
And he wished he'd retired right then. But it's hard. It's a hard thing to walk away from.
Well, there's that line in Hamilton where King George, when he hears that George Washington is going to walk away, he goes, "I didn't know that was a thing a person could do."
Yeah, exactly.
which is it's a great line, and then it is. I mean, the real line is crazy too, right? King George does hear that George Washington is going to return to his farm. He goes, "What's George Washington going to do after the Revolution?" And, you know, one of his men says, "I think he's going to return to his farm in Mount Vernon." And he goes, "If he does that, he'll be the greatest man in the world." Like, you're not supposed to do it. It's
not supposed to do it.
You can't walk away from the thing that everyone wants. And so there's something truly majestic about it when people do it. And then there's the other part of us that's like, wait, you walked away from being a professional football player to preserve your marriage. You know, there's like some other part of us that finds it deeply shameful also. That's there's something beautiful about it. And then like, we're mad that Obama is not more politically engaged. Well, you know, like, you're not supposed to walk away. When you're busy, when you work hard, when you push yourself, one of the things that's really important is recovery. And recovery is not just about rest. It's also what you put in your body so you take advantage of that rest. So we get what it needs to recover. Creatine is one of the most essential nutrients for your body and brain to do that. It supports strength and power and recovery, even memory and mental sharpness. And now, thanks to Momentous, today's sponsor, is easier and more refreshing. Their new creatine lemon delivers the purest creatine on the planet in a naturally flavored lemonade-style powder. And like with all the Momentous supplements, it follows the Momentous standard. You know, Momentous is not just another supplement brand. They built their entire reputation around doing the fundamentals with precision, and they back it with science and transparency and trust. If you've been thinking about taking creatine, or if you've taken it and dropped out, or you've tried it and you didn't like it, this is your moment to get back on track with a formula you'll actually enjoy. It'll make you feel great and help you recover faster and better. Just head over to livemomentous.com and use code STOIC for up to 35% off your first order. That's code STOIC at livemomentous.com.
Yeah, and that has to do with our like American obsession and American ambition. You know, the first question I asked Andrew Luck when we started talking was, I asked, you know, why did you become a quarterback? Yeah. And his answer was, he laughed, that Andrew Luck laugh of his, but he said, well, I don't think I had a choice. And it was because, you know, once you've shown promise at being able to do this uniquely American thing that has this obsession around it, like, you're on a track.
Yes.
And, you know, you're going from high school, you know, and he's a Texas quarterback. People forget that. Like, all the phenomenal Texas quarterbacks over the years, he's one of them. And, you know, you're in that culture, and it's like a tractor beam that takes you in. And I don't think he really stopped to think about what it had done to him and who it had kind of turned him into until he was injured.
Yeah, you become a machine. You become like an animal. You turn off some part of yourself to get that level, or that's what we tell ourselves.
Or refuse to acknowledge that it even exists.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that, like, quarterback has become so big that I think that to do it now, that the celebrity and the fame piece of it come with it.
Yeah.
And so I think to do it now, you have to have that whole in
you
your
have to want that from the beginning. It's not I just want to be a quarterback and I don't like the fame part.
Yes.
You knew that was the bargain from the beginning.
Like Steve Young and I at one point talked about all the hats you have to wear as a quarterback, and I think we stopped at 24.
Wow.
From matinee idol to field general to astonishing asshole to amateur psychologist to, spokesperson of a multi-billion-dollar organization, all these things. And oh, by the way, you also have to be able to throw the ball through windows that nobody else can see, much less take advantage of. I think that to do it now, you not only have to be able to have the ability to throw, but you have to have that hole in your personality that requires constant adulation and reassurance and love.
Yeah.
That's very similar to a politician or a lead singer, something like that, where it's that just kind of has to be part of the equation at this point. What is that doing to people? What does that do to teenagers when we're so obsessed with spotting genius early without really understanding what makes the genius in the first place? That is going to be really interesting to see.
When it's not you're given time to develop a fully rounded out personality with diverse interests and connections, because you have been specialized since you were 10 or
Absolutely.
earlier.
And
so you don't have the things that would actually help you manage that thing. Like in music, they call it LSD, lead singer disease.
Yeah.
You're catching this quarterback disease at 10.
One of the characters in my book is a kid who's at LSU now named Colin Hurley. And he was on the fast track, and he wanted to be the youngest person really to do just about everything in the space of quarterbacks. He didn't play middle school football. He went straight from 6th grade to starting on varsity. And he graduated high school and started at Louisiana State when he was 16 years old. When he started, he started attending. Yeah. And when he got to campus, until he turned 17 years old, there had to be a football staffer on him at parties because legal age of consent is 17 in Louisiana. And I mean, you're talking about a college freshman who, barely has his driver's license.
And then you think about even the parents that would subject their kid to said situation.
And his dad is an interesting guy. He's a loving hard ass. His name is Charlie. And he was a former cop and homicide detective in Miami. And so he's seen everything. Yeah. And he had a premonition for so long that this might not end well, just because of how young his son was in this dangerous world that he was entering. And, last Christmas, Colin returned to campus with a car, and his dad didn't want him to have a car, but, you're getting NIL money. Yeah. You're going to LSU. If you want to get a car, what are you supposed to do? And he wrote a note to his son, or he wrote a note and he put it in the glove box, and it was in case of emergency, please call me. And it was Charlie Hurley, and he gave his phone number because he knew from life that that's where cops look.
Yeah.
And 2 weeks later, Colin was in a near fatal accident at 3:00 in the morning when he ran his car into a tree right on the edge of the LSU campus.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, the inability to turn stuff down when everyone is throwing it at. I think that's what you think about the Washington thing. It's what do you mean you're resigning your commission and going home? What do you mean you don't want to stay president for life? We're just not good at walking away. I think about this. Do you listen to Mark Maron's podcast? Mm-hmm. Oh, he started podcasts. This is his thing. He's the biggest one, was the biggest one. And he's walking away after 16 years, and people are what are you doing? You're not supposed to stop. Mm-hmm. And part of what he's talking about is nobody ever quits. Mm-hmm. And you're not supposed to turn down millions of dollars on your kid's behalf because they might get in a car accident. Even though at some level we know it's not healthy or good, but you just don't.
Everybody gets swept up in it. Yeah. And even being around, I got swept up in it a little bit. You know what I mean? Because I'm trying to learn in this book, I'm trying to give readers the clearest eye possible of, what it means to be a quarterback and what it has meant. And in all the great ways and all the cruel ones. And, even when, red carpets and VIP treatment and all of those things, witnessing it up close, it's easy to get...
There's an energy to it.
There's an energy to it, and there's a seductiveness to it. And then when you're not a quarterback, even if you retire on your own terms, you still live with that. And the hardwiring that you had to create within yourself to survive, I think, is uniquely ill-suited with A, being content away from the game, and B, a lot of everyday interactions. Like John Elway, one of my main characters, he was my guy growing up. He was the first quarterback who was number 1 out of high school, first pick in the draft, first ballot Hall of Famer. And so I knew that he had to create something within himself to withstand that.
Yeah, to say, I deserve this. And
to survive it, and we were talking at one point, and he was just talking about how warped you get, and how because of the things you go through, you're almost like incapable of feeling empathy. Like his son, Jack, was a quarterback in high school, and you think about the pressure of being a quarterback in Denver with your last name Elway, and his dad was the offensive coordinator. His dad was retired. And Jack was feeling the pressure very understandably. He was a good quarterback. He got a scholarship to Arizona State, and he walked away after a year. He was just kind of burned out. But when he was in high school, he was feeling that stress. And, his dad, of all people, you'd think would be the one who would know what it's like to go through that and could empathize, and he couldn't do it. And he told me
he had to turn off that part of himself to be able to do it. So the idea that someone else would struggle with it, it's like, wait, I had that option. I think about this like this is a strained analogy to be sure, but like there's an argument that people who think that being gay is a choice think that in part because it's a choice for them. Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
Like you turn, like, what do you mean I'm turning off weird things that I feel inside? Why aren't you doing it? So to see someone who's just like themselves or struggling with themselves, it's like, what do you mean? So there's this kind of, for people who've gone through some form of adversity or harrowing experience or struggle with something, you'd think it would turn on empathy, but it turns off empathy because they had to turn it off to be whatever weird thing they are themselves.
Yeah, I mean, to survive that winnowing where you go from one of 16,000 starting quarterbacks in high school across the country to, one of the top 10 in the NFL to one of the 3 who make it to the Hall of Fame. And, those are some vaguely sociopathic tendencies that you have to turn on and nurture. And, like there's not a lot of outlets and support system to help you regulate that.
No.
And it was interesting because he told me flat out, I didn't care what my son was going through. He was like, I figured just compete on the field and let the chips fall where they may. His son goes off to Arizona State, decides it's not for him after a year. And at Elway's 50th birthday party, his son comes up to him and he says, I feel like I let you down. And, John said, no, you didn't. And then Jack said something really interesting, which was, that he missed it, that he missed being a quarterback. Cause like, you can't not once you kind of get it's just unlike any other job in sports. And it's like that for a lot of different reasons. But like, again, it's something that like, once you've done it, that piece of you is always alive.
Yeah. When I was thinking about like how do you prepare someone to be a quarterback? Not how do you make them be able to do it on the field, which is, I think your point is that in some way, that's the one thing they all can do. You get to a level and then that's actually not that important anymore. It's this other stuff that you can either do or not do.
Well, yeah. I mean, when I was playing, I was just fascinated. Like, how do they fit the ball into that window?
Yeah.
And then at the end of the book, that's what made me want to be a quarterback and made me want to study that. And then, at the end of this process, I kind of realized that's the thing they have to be able to not think about.
But also, it's like you go to the comment, they can all put the ball through the window. Yeah. So like, there's something else that either makes you. It's like, I was actually thinking of Tom Wolfe's The Right Stuff when I was reading your book. Like, you either have the other right stuff or you don't.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about like, how do you prepare someone for something so inherently alienating and strange and isolating? And the precedent in what I write about is there's this. So Hadrian is the emperor of Rome. and he doesn't have a son. So he has to pick. There's this period in Roman history where the emperor picks his heir.
Yeah.
And so he sees something in this kid that he thinks the kid has it, but the kid's too young. So he adopts an older Roman senator named Antoninus on the condition that Antoninus in turn adopt this boy, Marcus Aurelius. So he sets in motion this succession plan that, he probably thinks it's going to be like a couple year process. Instead, Antoninus lives for 20 years. Mm-hmm. But so Marcus Aurelius has 20 years of on-the-job training. But you think about the jockeying back and forth between, the first and the second string quarterback and how much they hate each other. Now imagine, like, you're the future emperor and there's this other dude in front of you who's emperor who's not your dad. You're both going to hate each other. But how does this sort of partnership... It's remarkable historically in that it's totally unprecedented before and since. Like, mm-hmm. they not only don't kill each other, but they work together and then they both do a good job. Mm-hmm. But there's this interesting passage in Meditations where Marcus Aurelius, he's writing to himself, obviously he's now the emperor, and he says, you have to take care not to become Caesar-ified. Mm-hmm. He says, you be careful that you are not stained purple, because the emperor wears a purple cape. And so he's talking about this thing that we know, the way that power corrupts. And he seems to do a pretty good job, but it's just fascinating to me that there doesn't seem to be any process by which you can prepare someone to have a job. Like in the case, I think there'd been like 15 emperors before him. How many, like multi-season NFL quarterbacks have there even been? Probably 100 maybe, 200? Yeah. Like not that many.
Not that many.
And so you're being groomed at 8 or 10 for the potentiality of doing a thing that as a rule, almost everyone fails at. Mm-hmm. And it ends... although it could end financially lucratively, it ends badly for everyone involved. It's crazy.
How do you raise a quarterback? I mean, that's like, first of all...
Probably not by trying to.
I think that there's a lot of virtue in that. But one of the things that's interesting is that there's this entire multi-million-dollar circuit that has to do with youth quarterbacking.
Right.
All these camps and quarterback coaches and physical trainers and media specialists, all these things that you think you need.
Yeah.
And, they all know. I think that most of them are pretty good guys. There are some of them that I think are a little full of it. But like, if you tell a dad, hey, your son's got some of this, he's got something special here. I mean, Rick Neuheisel says, they are nomads in the desert and you're giving them water. I mean, they will write checks and write checks and write checks. And like, these are kids who are becoming fully formed. And like Steve Young and I talked about it, where he talked about how you're celebrating the hope.
Yeah.
And that's really a dangerous space to be in. That's a dangerous space. It's a lot of adults for a young child to have to please.
Are there any quarterback moms, or is it almost always dads?
It's a lot of dads, but it's a lot of moms too. I've seen moms that I think in some ways are more competitive than the dads in some cases. But, it ends up just by gravitational pull, I think, being a lot of dads. And I was at Elite 11, which is this national showcase that takes place in Southern California every year. And they have regional ones. And, you make it through regionals and you make it to nationals. And really, it's a fun honor to have, but there's no predictive value in it whatsoever. It's a beauty contest for quarterbacks, and yet they're imprecise even at that, because Patrick Mahomes didn't make it as a high school kid, which is astounding and bewildering. But we were walking off the field and there was one particular quarterback, I'm not going to name him, but he had a rough day. And this is like 7-on-7 stuff. Like, nobody cares.
Yeah.
You're throwing to people you've never even thrown to before. And his dad lit into him in front of everybody. Oh, and, he just said, what the fuck are you doing out there? And I mean, it was embarrassing for that kid. And Colin Hurley, who I was there kind of shadowing, saw it all happen. And he waited until the dad had left that scene, and he went over and, that kid's a peer of his. He's a blood brother, and to a certain extent, like they're two of the only people who know what it's like to be teenagers in 2024 or 2023, trying to be great at this thing. Yeah. And he went over and just gave him a hug. Because even though I don't think Charlie Hurley was ever like that to Colin, he could empathize, and he felt a kinship with him.
He had other adults do that to him, I'm sure. You know, like they all have, and I actually do wonder if that partly explains some of the political stuff with the quarterbacks, where it's like, yeah, they all have daddy issues. They all know what it's like to have an abusive, erratic, crazy dad, or most of them do.
Oh, I know. Almost every quarterback story can be divided into too much daddy or not enough.
Yeah. Is ego just a prerequisite?
It's not only ego. Ego is like something that's like much smaller than a prerequisite. I think that somewhere in there you have to believe that you're kind of a superior human to everyone around you. Like you have to believe that you know better than everyone else, including the head coach.
Yeah, right.
And I have this moment in the book. So Steve Young is trying to, learn the West Coast offense. He's behind Joe Montana. This is the early 90s. Joe is his body starting to break down, but he's still obviously a genius. Yeah. And Steve is running the West Coast offense the way they tell him to do it, which is you go from options, reads 1 to 5, and if nothing else is there, you scramble. And Steve is getting sacked a lot and getting hit a lot because he's going through options 1 through 5. Whereas like Joe Montana had figured out that the playbook can be either an open highway or a prison. Yeah. But whatever it is, it's a suggestion.
Yes.
And he would skip options 1 to 2, go straight to 3, then to 4. And if that wasn't there, he'd just get rid of the ball.
Right.
And he'd live to fight again. And he was avoiding hits that way. And even though his body was starting to break down, that was his genius, was that he understood the offense better than the coaches could draw it up. And Steve, meanwhile, was doing what he thought was right, which was doing it exactly as Bill Walsh, a supposed genius, had drawn it up.
You experience it in anything you do where you go, hey, I'm a cog in this machine unless I insist on not being it, right? So like it'll use me up, right? Like the system is good for the system, often at the expense of the quarterback. And I have to think about, how do I have a playing career more than 2 seasons, right? Like I can only take so many sacks. And so it's like the ego of like when I don't know, your publisher sends you something and you go, I'm not going to do that. Like right. Like without the ego, you're the team player all the time. You do what they ask, you follow the process, and you get fucking worn down and chewed up, and you have to go like, no, like our interests are aligned only up to a point, right? And that you have to have. That's a lot to ask a 22-year-old to figure out when they only have one body, to go like, hey, you got to figure out where the coach wants you to do X because it's good for the coach and it's good for this. But, if you push back even just slightly, it can go a way that's much more favorable to you.
And it has to exist within this very fragile ecosystem where doubt cannot penetrate. So there's like a natural tension there. Yeah. And I think one of the most interesting things that I spent a little bit of time on is how some quarterbacks, you think one of the basic requirements of the job is when you're answering questions from the press, you take all the blame, no matter what really happened. That's just part of it. Yeah. You recite your lines, right? Yeah. And there's people who just cannot do that. Yeah. Pro quarterbacks who just cannot do that. And that to me was fascinating. Like what is it that when you get in that particular position where you're just doing what everyone expects of you, there's some sort of internal wall that rubs against where you just cannot do it.
You figure these things out. Miley Cyrus was being interviewed with the in the Times. And the guy said, you seem much less, like much calmer, much more at ease, more open than previous times I've interviewed you. And she goes, yeah, I've learned that if I don't like a question, I can just say, hey, I'll be right back. Can you excuse me? And then just not come back. And someone else will come in and fix this for me. Right. And there's just these like tips of the trade that you only realize, like there's this kind of the level and then the level above, right? And like, you figure those things out as you go. Yeah. And then some people don't figure them out. And it just makes it so much harder for them. And like as a member of the public who's just like, well, you got to get that, maybe that feels unfair. But as someone who's like, one of a handful of big pop stars, like Probably Lady Gaga was like, hey, you just do this. Like somebody else figured that out and passed it along.
And plus it only becomes a thing if you don't answer it. Right.
Yes.
If you do answer it and you just utter whatever cliche you want to get you through it, no one cares and no one will notice. And it's one of the things that I think, my first book was on the New England Patriots and it was basically about Brady and Belichick. Yep. It's a good Warren copy there. And,
this is a galley. This is my galley.
Yeah.
It's got notes in it.
Yep. And I think that, so you write a book about quarterbacks, like how do you write about Brady when I literally just wrote a book about him? And so I try to, touch base with him in particular parts where I think it really illuminates aspects of him or his personality. And one of the things that I think is really, underappreciated is how much shit he could eat.
Yeah.
Because Belichick, unlike most coaches, would not let him off the hook.
Yeah. And
there was a game that they played. It was in 2014. So I think it was the year you might have spoke to them. They won the Super Bowl that year. Yeah. And, that was a pivotal year in the New England Patriots dynasty, because if they don't win the Super Bowl that year, I think Tom Brady is probably a San Francisco 49er and Jimmy Garoppolo is still the Patriots quarterback right now. But they lost to the Chiefs early in the season, and it was a pivotal loss. They got blown out on national television. And Belichick is doing his Monday morning squad meeting, and he just rips into Brady. And, people are saying this is the best quarterback in the league. Look at this shit. And Brady, who's at that point in his late 30s, has put up with this his entire adult life, looks to his left, looks to his right, and just gets up and walks out of the meeting. And I think the other Patriots were kind of like, oh no, is this it?
Yeah.
Like, is he going to, he walked straight to his locker. He banged out some sort of text message and he sat back and like exhaled. And one of the Patriots saw him do all this and was like, hey, 12, you straight?
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, I'm fine, I'm good. And he was like, oh, thank God, because
he just figured out another wrinkle in the system that he did have to take it, but he also didn't have to take it.
Exactly. I mean, even Tom Brady has his limits, but I like that to me, I think is one of the most fascinating aspects of him, that he just had the capacity to eat shit like that.
Yes. My favorite scene in the Patriots book is the one where he's throwing the ball around with some receivers and they're just dropping. He's like just being so hard on them. Yeah. And somebody pulls Tom Brady aside and goes, hey, like these kids aren't going as far as you are.
Yeah, it was when he was in high school.
That's when the alienation starts. Yeah, I think, right? It's like the sense that, oh, hey, there's different tracks to this. Mm-hmm. And you're not the same and you're not held to the same standard. And by the way, you can't hold everyone to the same standard. That's a lot to put on a 18-year-old or a 16-year-old or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. And Brady's always been one of those guys who, like, growing up, everybody was always like, what's the matter with you? Yeah. Because he would break his Nintendo remote when he'd lose on Super Mario Brothers, That piece of his personality never left. Like, in a lot of ways, we evolve a lot as, people. And in some ways, you grow out of certain things. Sure. His dad loved golfing with him and they would golf and Tom would miss shots and he'd get so angry. And at one point, he'd throw clubs. Yeah. And Tom Sr. would pull him off the course. And it's like, we're not doing that. Yeah. And, fast forward to him as a New England Patriot throwing tablets on the sideline and stuff, he's a grown up, but that rage inside him.
There's a scene in the book where he sees his son do that. I think, right? And he's like, man, this isn't going to go well. It's like the Forrest Gump thing. Like, is he like me? And he's like, he realizes that he is, like, and there's something kind of haunting.
It was that he was just so hard on himself. Yeah. And he was like, oh, bro, I was hoping this might skip you,
Yes, exactly.
Because there's a lot of torment. And, as a writer, there's a lot of things that go into writing. There's, this base of knowledge. There's finding the right time to catch the wave. But, at the end of the day, it's you and your computer. Mm-hmm. It is alone. Yeah. And, you've got to figure out a way to get something on there that you can live with for a day, whatever it might be. And that torture exists all the way up the line, and especially in this profession, I think.
Well, even if you love it, there's some part of you that's a miserable fuck that makes you do it. Yeah. And people who are not miserable fucks don't understand it. And there's just an unbridgeable gap, Like, people ask they'll ask my wife, like, are you a writer? And I go, like, thank God, no. Like, I don't know how two could exist. Like, it seems like it's more like you're lucky. You know, like I think there is something about, as great as it is, as much as you love it, there's this work you have to do constantly to keep it on a leash, I think. Unless you want to turn yourself over to it completely, and maybe there's some slight plane you get, like some higher transcendent level, but it appears to come at the cost of essentially everything else.
When I became a parent, I struggled a lot with regulating that mood.
Yes.
You know, because when you're married, it's okay. You know what I mean? Everyone kind of, your wife gets it.
Two consenting adults that know what they signed up for.
Exactly. And, you know, your wife can help you to an extent, but she can also just go in the other room and watch TV or whatever it is.
Oh, did you have a good day? Yeah. Sure.
But when you're a parent, you realize like how those storm clouds gather and what form they take. And, you know, I remember, you know, going to a therapist when I had just become a parent because I needed to figure out a way to not let stress from the day job just cast a shadow over the entire house.
Totally.
And
that's why I have an office. I realized like I could do it from home, but I don't want this shit at home.
And even now, like my 8-year-old son, you know, he gives me a hard time because I walk around the house muttering and I don't even realize it, but he notices it.
Yeah. If you could do something else, do something else.
It's one of the things, you know, I write about Warren Moon a lot in the book, and he's such an interesting, he has such a kind of a star-crossed career, but he was the first black quarterback for whom greatness was expected.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's a hell of a burden. And people, you know, got hurt in his career. Like he got hurt, other people got hurt over the course of his career because of who he thought he had to be. Yeah. And, you know, he talked a lot about, he had an incident with his wife in the 90s where he was arrested for domestic violence. He was later acquitted, but, you know, he knew that the path he was on was unsustainable and it was going to end very poorly. So he went to counseling. And he would sneak into a building through the back door, utmost discretion. Eli Manning, when he was with the Giants, saw a therapist, and the Giants, all the coaches and the execs were like, no one can know about this.
Because the quarterback can't be weak?
The quarterback can't be, like, think about what the media might do with it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, Moon was one of the first, I think, to try to use that as an outlet to help him just manage and learn how to talk, you know, learn how to like communicate about his feelings, learn that it's okay to communicate. Because as a quarterback, of course, you're thinking, I have to amass everything.
Right.
And as we all know, there's limits to that.
Is it possible to be a quarterback and a reasonable, regular person? Like, I mean, in a way, does that make what Andrew Luck did all the more impressive? Or like, are there peers you would say like they're similar?
Who do I think? Yeah. Who do I think is the most, the best at regulating all those different people you have to be? Bob Dylan did this movie in the late 80s, and you know, the director, he asked the director, like, you know, what do you want me to do? Who do you want me to be? And he goes, well, just be yourself, you know, in the scene. And he was like, well, which one? You know? So I think that of all the quarterbacks that I've met, gotten to know, studied, even ones who I never met, you know, people who died before I got into this, I honestly think Eli Manning is the best at regulating all that stuff.
Really?
Because he came in, think about the pressures, being a Manning, being Peyton's little brother at every stage, then going to the biggest media market, being a disappointment, you know, for first couple years, people not knowing if you were going to pan out. And he did a bunch of things that I think are really admirable and also just really genuine. And he's one of the most genuine superstars I think I've ever met. And people are kind of surprised when I mention him, but he just did a bunch of things that I think, you know, seeing a counselor, so figuring out a way to balance every part of his life. He's had, you know, the same marriage for a long time, and they're a thriving marriage. And, you know, he's been an excellent father. Quarterbacks, you know, there's a balance that they have to have between knowing that they're apart from everyone else and also being one of the guys. And when it comes to meeting the press, the starting quarterback usually meets with the local media twice a week, after the game and once during the week. And those once a week things, you know, were supposed to be 20 minutes and they end up being like 7 or something. And the NFL has rules that everybody has to be in the locker room for 40 minutes for 4 days a week while the press is there. I think 4 days a week. And the starting quarterback is never there. And if he is, he's not talking to the press. Eli Manning, again, this is a small example, but like Eli Manning would sit at his locker every day and he was available. It didn't matter if you were from ESPN Magazine or the Asbury Park Press, you could get a one-on-one interview with Eli Manning. Now, he may not say anything interesting because he's too smart and savvy.
Yeah.
But, and you fast forward again to the Manning that's, 40 minutes away from here, Arch. When Arch got his first start last year, he called Eli. And it wasn't to ask about how to dissect certain defenses or whatever. Right. It was like, how do you deal with fame? Wow. How do you deal with these certain things? And of course, there is no perfect answer to these things, but Eli had a lot of wisdom for him.
It would be interesting coming from that tradition, We talk about no one can tell you how to do it, but if you do, you're actually a third generation quarterback that's starting to get pretty nuts. There's a story, have you read that book, My First Coach? It's about like quarterbacks and their dads.
Yeah.
There's a story in that one where Archie Manning talks about deciding to retire early because he could feel Eli Manning was drifting and he didn't have the same relationship that he had with his other sons.
Yeah.
And you just go, what a fucking powerful message that sends when dad gives up millions of dollars, again, gives up the thing you're not supposed to want to give up to spend more time with you. I mean, it makes sense that you would do a pretty good job yourself when you saw someone at least trying to do it better than, it had been done.
And that's something that I think has stayed with those guys. I mean, I think that again, when you're a quarterback, like during the season, at least, there's no work-life balance.
Yeah.
You're devoted to one master.
Yeah.
And that's the team. But, the Manning cast is a terrific way to watch Monday Night Football. What makes it so cool is that I think both Eli and Peyton can see the game through the quarterback's eyes, no matter who the quarterback is, whether it's a rookie, a journeyman, a franchise guy. They kind of understand. And so you can really learn a lot. But the reason why they do it is so that they don't have to travel. Like they both do it out of the house.
Right.
And that gave them a chance to stay current, be with the game, share some knowledge, have fun, but not have to be part of a crew that spends, 3 or 4 days a week on site.
Yeah, I maybe it was from your reporting, but one of the things that I took that's been helpful for me is so people look at Tom Brady and they go, this is what it costs to be great at what you do. It tears apart your marriage. This is what it takes. And it sounded like, from what I've read, that it wasn't the commitment to football that ultimately is what's taxing. It's that he would finish the football season in which he was a maniac. Like to be great at something, you have to be a maniac at that thing. And then instead of going, hey, I've got 3 months off, it was, now I've got to shoot all the TV commercials. I've got to do, it was actually the off season that was the imbalance on top of the imbalance. And one of my friends gave me this, he said, as a writer, he said, it's work, family, scene, pick 2. So it's like you can be a maniac about your work and then you can be dedicated to your family. But if you want to go to parties, you want to do all the other shit, one of those two is going to suffer. And I think people often take the wrong lesson because they don't actually see what the schedules of these people look like. Like you can be maniacal about a craft or a trade or a sport or whatever. And then as long as you just go right home after, you can be decently, it's going to be hard on your family to be traded or moved or whatever the hours. But as long as you're not also trying to squeeze in a bunch of other selfish shit or ego feeding shit, you can probably keep it together. The problem is we can't say no to the other stuff on top of the big thing, the life-consuming thing that we've already committed to.
Yeah, anytime there's a spectacular success or a spectacular self-destruction, there's a lot of things that happen that led up to that are all invisible.
Yeah.
And Brady is fascinating because, remember, he won his 7th Super Bowl with the Bucks, and, Gisele Bündchen, right after the game on the field, says to him, what more do you have to prove?
Yeah.
And he kind of avoids answering. You watch him, he kind of moves out of the way and goes to hugging his kids. He didn't want to be pinned down right there. But you go on Instagram and there's all these Instagram quarterbacks, quote unquote, the next Tom Brady. He's only 13. And, they show this guy running around and doing all this stuff. And that shows such a fundamental lack of sophistication, to say nothing of maybe it's so unfair to put that on a kid,
Sure,
but whatever.
Yeah.
But like, it just shows that you had no idea what made Tom Brady Tom Brady. You know, he goes to Michigan, he's 7th on the depth chart. He finally gets a chance to start, and he has to condition himself to not take a single snap in practice for granted.
Yeah.
And he conditioned himself in college that he can't have a bad play in practice because he may not play in the game.
Right.
Then you go to the Patriots, where that is the working ethos of the entire Bill Belichick philosophy on steroids.
Yeah.
And then you have over 20 some years playing, you play against Peyton Manning. He knows that during those games against Peyton Manning, if he has one bad play, that could cost them the game, which could cost them home field advantage in the playoffs, which could cost them the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
One play.
Yeah.
So you think about what that does to somebody over the course of their life.
Right.
And, what it did was it produced the greatest quarterbacking career that anyone's ever seen and the most accomplished football player. And, it's also someone starting over in their late 40s.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember I was talking to Lance Armstrong one time, and he told me that basically the reason, what he took out of the cancer battle was like, winning is living and losing is death. Yeah. And he's like, I just looked at literally every argument, every option, every choice, every one-on-one, everything was like, if I don't beat this person, I'm dead. Mm-hmm. And you go, oh, okay, I could see why that would be a thing that would help you in fucking chemotherapy. And I could see why that would help you win the Tour de France. And I would see why it would also take you past any point of reasonability on what you're doing and not doing.
And to bring it full circle, like that's why Tom feels that way when he sees his son holding himself to a high standard and being hard on himself.
Yes. And
because
also,
he knows how this ends.
Yeah. And also, like, because I sent you this message about it because I saw he launched this email list. And I'm like, why? Like, why? Like, you're making $430 million just doing announcing. You need to have another me. But like, when they're like, hey, we'll pay you X to do X, the part of you that can't waste a single snap. I mean, I get it because I'm that way. Like, the idea of like, I don't actually need this. Mm-hmm. I can say no to this and be fine. Or like people will be like, hey, do you want to write this thing for this thing? And I'm like, why am I even considering this? Mm-hmm. Do you know, like I have 3 books I have to write and then an unsolicited request to do something. Now, because it's there, I'm considering it, right? And so you can see how the part of you that goes, no, I fucking seize every opportunity that's in front of me. That's what actually makes you a great quarterback, but then it makes it hard for you to be a good quarterback and then regular person because you're just that all the time. Even when you're applying the quarterback mentality to, do you want to do this other thing or not? And this other thing is superfluous.
Yeah, I mean, that entire, in my own way, I can relate to that, what you were saying. And like, it's that entire thing. It's that jockeying between insecurity and needing to be praised or the rush you get from a byline, the rush you get from standing in front of people and giving, a speech and having people give you a standing ovation. It's all of those things wrapped up in that. And I think that, when you're out of the quarterback space, there are things in place maybe to check you here or there, even though it's ultimately up to you. And when you're in that tunnel of the quarterback space, there's very, very few.
Yeah.
And that's where I think it becomes difficult. And that's where I think that for all these guys, Steve Young loved Roger Staubach, and he asked Roger Staubach when he retired, because Staubach obviously has probably become the most successful great quarterback ever in retirement. I mean, has a real estate empire. And, Steve asked him, like, you seem like you've done pretty good. Like, how do you walk away from football? And Staubach was like, run. You have to run away from the game. You can never look back.
Interesting.
And Steve kind of ran. He kept one foot in the pool, but like it's that exact thing because Joe Montana, says, I wish that everyone could experience being an NFL quarterback for just one Sunday. Yeah. Because then they'd get it.
Yeah. Right. But it is, it's weird. It's like, why was Kobe Bryant like producing movies? Or like, why did Kobe Bryant need a venture capital fund? Some part of it's probably like, you got to put that energy somewhere. But also like, if you don't wrestle with why you have that energy, there's just never enoughness. And so you're just doing, and you know, at the end of the day, we all fucking die and nothing happens, you know, like.
I think that and Brady did this too, but I think that he knew that it was going to be devastating.
Yeah.
It was going to be a death of sorts when he walked away. And so he was looking for exit ramps so that when he was exiting into things.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you had Brady, you know, has this like career that spans 2 decades, accomplishes everything you could accomplish. Years before he retired, he had set up his Fox deal. He had these other businesses, you know, he had a production outfit. He had his TB12 quote unquote lifestyle brand. You know, he had all these things he was planning to do. And yet still, you know, he's talked about it where, you know, he said he felt like he was like, you know, in a washing machine where you're just bouncing everywhere.
Yeah.
And even it got Brady. Like even with all of that, it got Brady. And Elway was talking about how, you know, you exit Super Bowl champion, all these things, perfect ending. And then you go into these other spaces and you're behind everyone else.
Yeah.
And your name only gets you so far.
Yeah.
And, you know, Elway went and became the GM of the Arena League Colorado Crush. Like, what is the great John Elway doing, becoming the GM of an Arena League team and doing these goofy commercials with John Bon Jovi?
Yeah.
It's because that was his graduate school. He knew that he wanted to get back into football and he wanted to learn how to run a team. And he looked at that like his graduate school for it.
Yeah, it's funny. You'll be like, why is the ex-president on The View? Or what? You know, like, you're like, but like, because you need not your fix, but you're used to being able to tell people what you're thinking. And like, you know, and then all of a sudden you're just a guy, you know, like they asked Truman what he did the first day he was out of the White House, and he goes, I had to take the suitcases up to the attic. And you're just like, what that's not there's no transition there. And you go from being a not regular to a regular person, and you spent your whole life trying not to be regular, right? And then it catches up with you, and that's a brutal thing, because if you were content to be a regular person, you would have walked away the second you got like the fuck you money.
Absolutely. You know, Springsteen talks about how he, you know, goes off a cliff into depression when he comes back from a tour, and you go from being king to being a highly paid chauffeur, you know, basically. And, you know, even in his 60s and into his 70s, when he spent his entire life doing this and he knows the ebbs and flows of it, it would still get him. Like, that's how powerful that is.
You build kind of a life on the road and and then all of a sudden you're just like, you're not doing that thing. You got the Benz or something.
One of the things I try to write about in the book and get into is that, like, and it becomes too much, you know, even that all of that stuff just becomes too much. They have nowhere to put all of this anxiety and insecurity and doubt and whatever it might be. And so where do they put it? Like, you know, there's guys who I write about who put it to the bar, and, you know, that's where they go. You have Tom Brady who puts it to avocado ice cream, and other people who put it to Instagram. But, you know, I wanted to get into the people who, when we talk about Christianity and sports, it's often the question goes, well, you know, does God really care about a football game and who wins or loses given the state of the world? And I wanted to write about people and take them at their word. And I wanted to literally understand how religion helps them navigate this very complicated and odd job. I mean, Patrick Mahomes, like, people don't think about him as a fundamentalist Christian, and yet he is. You know, he has tattoos with scriptures on it, and he's one of the rare guys whose performance has always outpaced his notoriety. And I think he thinks that his relationship with Christ has helped him do that. And, you know, again, that's like a fascinating thing for me to explore.
Right. There's a humility to Christianity, but also there can be kind of an ego to it, where it's like, I'm the chosen one, he's speaking to me. And so it's probably the duality of it. It sort of grounds you, but then it also, you know, the kind of prosperity gospel of like, I deserve this because, like, it both explains it and helps you navigate it.
Yeah, there's a big difference between being gifted and blessed.
Yeah.
And even though they sound the same. And, you know, Kirk Cousins has obviously never been shy about his religion, and I went. He won this award from a Christian athletes group, and he got it at the Super Bowl. And so I went to see him, and it was this huge ballroom, and there's a lot of people there in Arizona, and it was an event for jocks, and so you got to see that cockiness right there alongside their faith, and that to me was really, really interesting. That year, Cousins had led the biggest regular season comeback in history. They beat the Colts, and it had eclipsed the Bills against the Oilers for the biggest comeback in NFL history. And that comeback, of course, was led by Frank Reich, who was so devout that he went to seminary school after he retired. And when Cousins had completed that comeback, he got a text from a number he didn't recognize, and it was from Frank Reich, and it was him passing along the torch, but also letting it known that he would find another level of his spirituality within the context of this comeback going forward. And I thought it was a fascinating idea and thought to dive into, especially from the outside.
Totally. And I mean, Aaron Rodgers comes from a super Christian background, and then obviously has stepped away from it, but that's all kind of swirling around in there. Mm-hmm. He is endlessly fascinating to me.
Rodgers, yeah. And I think that, like,
do you think it'll work?
Him with the Steelers? Yeah. I don't know. I think he can still play. I think that the tension that'll be interesting, I think, is not him versus age. I think he's smart enough that he'll figure that out, or it'll be exposed and we'll all see it.
No, I think it's him versus culture.
Exactly. Yeah. And so he's used to being kind of the face of this thing. And the Steelers have a culture that's in place before him, and it will outlast him. And I think that will be the interesting thing.
Or they've just bet it all on this person. To me, it's a character is fate kind of thing. Like, because if you're making a culture pick, you would never pick him. Right. He's the opposite of the culture. So there's this ego in, our culture can work with anyone, I suspect it will end exactly the way it's ended in everywhere else, because that's what the past is prologue, right? And so I suspect it will be an experiment that will go down in flames. Just like it hasn't really worked with Kyrie Irving, because Kyrie Irving is Kyrie Irving.
Yeah. I think that Aaron can probably do it for a year. You'll see little glimpses of him trying to kind of rebel, but I think he could do it. I think that, like, it couldn't have gone much worse than it went with the Jets in every way.
It can't go worse. It could go the same.
Yes, it could go the same.
50% as bad would still be that's just a car crash instead of a car crash on top of a train.
Exactly. But I think that everyone knows this is probably his last year, and I think I think he's savvy enough he could probably hold it together. Yeah.
Or something has been unleashed in a person, and once it's out, it doesn't.
Well, we all know it's there. So even if he's even if he's throttling it, we'll all know.
Yes.
We'll all know what he probably wants to say right there.
But it is interesting to think, like, so if being a quarterback is inherently alienating, strange, like, there's a reason we have term limits, right, in politics, right? It was never possible until very recently to be an NFL quarterback for 20 years, right? So you're getting the poison in much smaller doses before. And now it's there and it's working on you and into your bones, and it not just because it's bigger, but because you're doing it longer. And I think that's the interesting kind of new territory. Like, so you're talking about something now, the clock isn't just starting when the day you're drafted, but it actually started when you became a millionaire in high school in Texas. And so we say absolute power corrupts, absolutely, but it's also how long you have it. If you had it for 6 weeks, does it break you? Probably not. But if you're president for 25 years, you're probably not emerging from that experience whole.
Absolutely not. And it's weird to think about playing the long game in professional football, but you're allowed to do that now, basically because quarterback, I think, has become easier.
Yes.
You're not getting hit as much. All the rules have kind of made it harder on the defense, especially in high school and the college levels. Like, coaches have figured out ways to create space that leads quarterbacks who may not be very good to put up huge numbers to the point where you can't even trust statistics. Like the Milwaukee Brewers, before the Colorado Rockies came along, had had a minor league team in Denver, the Denver Zephyrs, and they could never trust any statistics coming out of Denver because of the altitude. And like Bob Waterfield's one of my characters, and he was kind of the first quarterback to be ushered into the culture as a sex symbol.
Yeah.
And he was married to Jane Russell, who was the sex symbol. He was a first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback who retired after, I think, 7 years. Like, that was his window.
In a way, that might be the long game, right?
Yeah.
Is like preparing for the long game in the media world that we exist in. Part of it might be like actually not trying to play for 20 years.
Exactly. And now, now it's like the first 7 years, that's like the first chunk of your career, if you play it right. Yeah. No, you're definitely not exiting whole, even if, like Tom Brady, your body's intact and, you don't look like you've played football for 24 years. Like I said, it warps you. And Elway was talking about it at one point because he was talking about his inability to feel empathy for other people and how he's had to learn how to do that. He just said, he was searching for the word and he was like, warped. Like, that was what it was. It was like, it just warps you. And like, there's parts of that are really fun too. Sure. You don't want to give it all up.
Yeah.
There's parts of being warped that are great.
Yeah. Well, it's like basically no boxer has ever retired too early. Mm-hmm. It's almost all, and like, so how do you know when to walk away? And just because you can keep playing and doing it doesn't mean it's good for you. And that goes back to the Washington thing. Is he was like, 2 terms, that's the right number. Mm-hmm. There's no mathematical equation, but he had some instinct. And then he had this kind of, like, we think about these people as disciplined, right? You don't become president, you don't become a quarterback, you don't become a billionaire without discipline. But can you be disciplined about that discipline?
Yeah.
And know, okay, I'm good, I'm walking away. Most of us don't have that discipline, which is like arguably the hardest and highest form of it.
I mean, I'm in my 25th year at ESPN. I was hired there when I graduated from school. And, in some ways I feel like I'm just getting started.
Right. That's the hard part. Yes. You're hitting your stride, and that's when you're supposed to have the restraint. It seems crazy.
Yeah, or like you'd be well out of an NFL career at my age and you're doing this stuff. That mind fuck of it all, I think is like, again, I spend a lot of time on it in the book, is just as I think it hits everybody differently. Yeah. But it hits everybody, and there's no doubt about it. And even Steve Young, who I think is like this great philosopher, he's a great quarterback philosopher. Sure. And he's
probably lucky he took so many hits, because like they weren't like hits to the head, but like his body broke down and he had to kind of leave earlier than he would have wanted to.
Right. Because he was a phenomenal athlete who had to learn how to be a quarterback in the NFL, and then had to learn how to be an artist, which are two different things.
Sure.
And by the time he had figured that out, it ended fast after that. But he went back to BYU. A year ago. It was like an alumni weekend, and someone said to him, hey, they got the alumni football game. You're playing, right? And he had never done anything like that. And he was like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm not going out there. I'm 62 years old. Yeah. He decided to do it. He's like, oh, what the hell? And, it was a Friday night. It was at the stadium. There was people in the stands. It was under the lights. It's just precious. Yeah. And, sure enough, he goes right out and throws an interception. But, they let some other other guys play, and he comes back at the end. And he leads them down the field, and they're in the red area, and he calls a play called Shake. And it was a play that he had coached his girls in flag football, and it was named after the Taylor Swift song, Shake It Off. And he calls this play, and he throws a touchdown pass. And everybody lifts him up, and it was like he'd won the Super Bowl. And he's laying in bed that night, just, on adrenaline. Yeah. And someone texts him a picture of the play from behind. Yeah. So right behind him, they were videotaping it, and he watched it like 20 times. And as he said, it was like, it was like a reminder of what's in him. Yeah. And man,
we're all fucking
that's a hard thing. That's a hard, I know. It's like, we're all Uncle Ricos, deep down, right?
You want to check out some books?
I'd love to.
All right, let's do it.